Tom DeWeese passionately believes in the rights of the individual over a powerful, tyrannical, collective society. He's the author of the policy book, Now Tell Me I Was Wrong, and the fictional political thriller, Erased. To promote his strongly held philosophy of free enterprise, national sovereignty, and limited government, he travels extensively across the nation, speaking out as an advocate of private property right and personal privacy protections. Recognized internationally as an expert in these fields, Tom has been quoted in such national publications as the New York Times, Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal, while making regular appearances on a large list of national and local radio and television programs. A native of Central Ohio, as I am, Tom and I attended rival high schools. He's been a candidate for Ohio legislature, served as editor of 2 newspapers, and has owned several businesses since the age of 23. I first met Tom at an event organized by another long-term freedom advocate, Bob Schultz. The event was a commemoration of the unfortunate and clandestine creation of the Federal Reserve System, which event was a precursor to Continental Congress 2009, a national grassroots movement in which individuals were elected from 43 states and met at St. Charles, Illinois, to create the Articles of Freedom, a national petition for redress of grievances that was delivered to state legislative and executive officers. Tom's the founder of the American Policy Center and is editor of the DeWeese Report. The American Policy Center is a grassroots action and education foundation dedicated to the promotion of free enterprise and limited government regulations. In 2006, Tom was invited to Cambridge University to debate the issue of the United Nations before the Cambridge Union, a 200-year-old debating society. Officially, there were 3 in favor and 3 against. That was the format of the debate. But from his own words, here's how it turned out. The voting results weren't that good. 361 noes, 33 ayes, and 15 abstentions. I was soundly defeated, but not bad, I thought, considering I had been 5 against 1. However, something much more important was about to happen. I was the only speaker who stayed after the tally was announced. About 200 students stayed as well. Over the next 2 hours, I fielded sincere questions about my stand on property rights. They earnestly asked me, "You really don't believe in the distribution of the wealth?" "No," I said, "it's theft." As I explained how it takes ownership of property to create wealth, and that's how we have done it in America to make us the richest nation on earth, several openly responded that my positions were an interesting concept. And they wanted to know where they could learn more. Today, we have the opportunity to learn more. I believe that what Tom has to offer is a proven method to put the grassroots to work advancing the cause of liberty. And as Ricardo Davis so aptly pointed out in our spring 2018 National Committee meeting, by building our base at the local level. We can own this. Dear friends of liberty, we can own this because the 2-party monopoly will not. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tom DeWeese.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate it. There's always been some kind of force loose in the world seeking domination over others. They build armies to invade, break things, and kill people in order to grab resources, build wealth and power, enslave people, and conquer. We've lived through such threats from megalomaniacs as Napoleon and Hitler and Stalin and Mao. Secret societies have plotted to gain power in different ways. In every case, their efforts have failed. No one has ever managed to rule the entire world. In some cases, they just push past too far too fast. Or they miscalculated the weather conditions in the lands they intended to control. It's incredible to note that both Napoleon and Hitler failed to remember that Russia has severe winter, which ultimately led to their downfall and defeat. However, What if such power mongers could find a way to keep their aggression under wraps and out of sight from those they intend to conquer until it was too late? Better yet, what if they could actually get their targeted victims to help them achieve control over them? No armies, no shots fired. Instead, the victims actually quietly pull the Trojan horse into the city and celebrate its arrival. What if there was a way for a small, dedicated group to rule the world by simply organizing under a single unifying plan accepted by everyone as fact and necessary? Acceptance of the plan would see every nation voluntarily surrendering its independence and its sovereignty to the aggressors. What could possibly be such a powerful message that some of the world's oldest and proudest nations would do this? What could get the world's strongest religions to turn their back on their most fundamental beliefs? What would get the freest nation on earth to join and agree? How about the threat of environmental Armageddon? Who could oppose such a plan? Only selfish zealots who refuse to give up their creature comforts would oppose efforts to save Mother Earth. It doesn't matter how many rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. The truth is that is exactly the force you and I are facing today as it drives almost unopposed to change our lifestyle, our economic system, and our system of government. The Club of Rome, one of the main forces behind this hidden plan to rule the world, openly explained their tactic and their goal by saying this, quote, "The common enemy of humanity is man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All of these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself." End quote. This is absolutely diabolical. Turn man against himself so that he will voluntarily submit to subjugation. The threat of global warming became the weapon of choice. And it doesn't matter if true science refuses to cooperate in this scheme, as actual global temperatures really are not rising, and there continues to be no evidence of any man-made effect on the climate. Truth hasn't been important to the scaremongers. Timothy Worth, president of the United Nations Foundation, said, quote, "We've got to ride this global warming issue. Even if the theory of global warming is wrong, we will be doing the right thing in terms of economic and environmental policy." To further drive home their complete lack of concern of truth, Paul Watson of Greenpeace declared, "It doesn't matter what is true, it only matters what people believe is true." And Christiana Figueres, the executive secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, told us outright what the real goal of the threat of environmental Armageddon truly is. She said, quote, "This is the first time in the history of mankind that we are setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution." Of course, she means free enterprise. Get rid of it. The blueprint for the implementation of this grand plan was revealed in 1992 at the UN Earth Summit. It was called the Agenda for the 21st Century, or Agenda 21. From its inception in 1992, the United Nations Earth Summit, 50,000 delegates, heads of state, diplomats, and non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, hailed Agenda 21 as the comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. Think about what that means, that statement. The 350-page, 40-chapter Agenda 21 document was quite detailed and explicit in its purposes and its goals. They warned us that the reorganization would be dictated through an all-encompassing policy affecting every aspect of our lives, using environmental protection simply as the excuse to pull all of our emotions and get us to voluntarily surrender our liberties. So in their zealotry to enforce the grand agenda, social justice became the moral force over the rule of law as free enterprise, private property, rural communities, and individual consumption habits became the targets labeled as racist and a social injustice. Such established institutions and free market economics were seen as obstructions to the plan, as were traditional family units, religion, and those who are able to live independently in rural areas. They are very, very concerned about the independence of people in rural areas. Finally, Agenda 21 was summed up in supporting documents this way. Listen carefully. Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society unlike anything the world has ever experienced. It requires a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. And you are living in a world where this is happening. And as you watch the news every night, you are seeing the insanity of that statement, step by step. The policy of Agenda 21 is called sustainable development. You hear that term in every part of our society, from community development to production of our food supplies to manufacturing of nearly every single product. Listen to the ads coming out of the global corporations. Oh, this is sustainable. This is better for you. This is to protect the earth. Sustainable, sustainable, sustainable. While sold as a means to secure a happy, healthy future of equality for all as it protects the environment, sustainable development policy, as it is enforced in every single community in the nation, has proven to be a direct attack on free enterprise, private property, and individual choice in our lives. It is the epitome of the tyrannical, out-of-control government. Ironically, its perpetrators were quite open and honest in their plans. We just didn't want to listen. The official report of the UN's Habitat 1 conference, which led up to Agenda 21 over time, explained the reasons for the attack on private property when it said this, quote, "Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subjected to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth and therefore contributes to social injustice." The reason the United States rose so fast over ancient societies when we were founded and we became the envy of the world, the wealth of the world, was because of private property ownership. And that is the center of their attack. This is a direct attack on the entire American economic system. But it gets even clearer. Peter Burley of the National Audubon Society said, "We reject the idea of private property." Thomas Lovejoy, science advisor to the Department of Interior, added, quote, "We will map the whole nation, determine development, and regulate it all." And Harvey Reuven, the vice chairman of ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, who helped create Agenda 21 at the UN level and made it their mission to bring it into every single community in the world, said this, "Individual rights will have to take a back seat to the collective. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Agenda 21. For over 20 years, I've been labeled a conspiracy theorist, a scaremonger, extremist, dangerous nutcase. I've been denied access to stages at major conferences, major news programs, and awarded tinfoil hats, all because I have worked to expose Agenda 21 and its policy of sustainable development as a danger to our property, to our rights, to our economic system, and our culture of freedom. The Southern Poverty Law Center has done 4 separate reports on me, labeling me a hate monger. Now, the sustainable forces have taken their plans to the ultimate, inevitable point. No longer are they trying to hide its true goal, global domination, because now we have the Green New Deal. I warned that Agenda 21 would control every aspect of our lives, including how and where we live, the jobs we have, the mode of transportation available to us, and even what we eat. The Green New Deal is a tax on everything we make, everything we do, everything we wear, eat, drink, drive, import, export, and breathe. In opposing smart growth programs, which are part of the plan out of Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development that is in almost every single community of this nation, I said the main goal was to eliminate cars, to be replaced by bikes, walking, and light rail trains. The Green New Deal calls for the elimination of the internal combustion engine. Now stay alert. The next stop will be a ban on the sale of new combustion engines by a specific date. They'll say that by this date we're going to have this happen, and then limiting the number of new vehicles to be sold. Always higher and higher taxes will be used to get the public to voluntarily reduce their use of such personal transportation choices. That's how it works, slowly but steadily towards the goal. I warned that under smart growth programs, now taking over every city in the nation, that single-family homes are a target for elimination, to be replaced by high-rise stack and pack apartments in the name of reducing energy use. That will include, as it comes together, as we now have wind and solar, when that is the only energy that we're allowed to have. They're moving in California to make that happen right now. I want you to imagine, I want you to picture what our country will look like when wind and solar are the only power that we are allowed to have. Every single state. I was told back in the 1990s by an expert that at that time, to just make up the energy shortage in the state of California using wind power, you would need an area the size of Connecticut, all paved over with a forest of windmills. Now, the Greens have accused me of being what they call the AstroTurf crowd, that what I want to do is pave the earth. Never in my life have I ever wanted to pave the entire state of Connecticut. But that is what they are calling for. Now, that was 20 years ago. Now, think about it now, the shortages. If you had only wind and solar power in the entire nation, we would have nothing but a forest of these and the solar panels as well. And the one thing you would have, as we paved over, you have to put the cement in, you have to put the wires in, you have to put the entire system in. You would never see anything else fly in the sky. There'd be no birds, no bats, nothing. This is what they call environmental protection. I've said many, many times that the environmentalists would come out of their high-rises in New York City and actually touch the ground. They might know something about the environment. Instead, they attack our farmers and our ranchers, our cattle people, people who know how the earth works. And they have attacked all of that and are trying to shut it all down. The Green New Deal calls for government control of every single home, office, and factory to tear down or retrofit every building in the nation to comply with massive environmental energy regulations. I warned that Agenda 21 sustainable policy sought to drive those in rural areas off the farms and into the cities where they could be better controlled. Now, when we started saying that, people said, "Oh, how can you do that?" The answer is you make it impossible to live in the rural areas. You control the water, you control the grazing lands, you control the land. Most recently, I warned that the beef industry is a direct target for elimination. It will start with mandatory decreases in meat consumption until it disappears from our daily diet. The consumption of dairy will follow. Since the revelation of the Green New Deal, the national debate is now over cattle emissions of methane and the drive to eliminate cattle from the planet. Control what we eat is a major part of the Green New Deal. Let me share this little side with you. I told a cattlemen's association this one day, and they were quite surprised by it. You've noticed that, first of all, we're attacking cow flagellants. It's become a national debate. Did you ever, when you were younger, ever think we would be having a debate about cow flagellants on national news? Well, you noticed in the West massive forest fires burning. This is because under environmental protection policies, sustainable policies, the Forest Service now will not allow anybody to clean the dead trees out of the floor of the forest. There is 10 feet of kindling on those forests, and that's why they are burning hotter than they've ever burned before. But as those dead trees lay there, there's something else that's happening. What do dead, rotting trees bring? Termites. Do you know that termite flagellants adds up to 50% of the methane levels that they are saying creates global warming? Every single environmental regulation that I've seen, actually damages the environment. That's the incredible part about it. I warned that part of the plan for Agenda 2030 was zero economic growth. They actually talked about this at the conference in 2015 when this was introduced. Zero economic growth. That this was the way. We had to keep the economy right here. We can't go running off in that direction or that direction. We've got to stay right here. And of course now, what does the Green New Deal call for but a massive welfare program where no one earns more than anyone else? Incentive to get ahead is dead. New inventions would disrupt this plan. And they've got a well-organized society that they're trying to put together. It's interesting to note that Alexander the Great and Thomas Jefferson lived in the same world. They traveled at the same speed on a horse. They lit their homes with the same candles. Along came Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and the Wright brothers. And they changed everything that had been civilized society practically since the beginning of time. The environmentalists, the sustainabilists putting these programs together are determined that we will never again have a Thomas Edison, a Henry Ford, or a Wright brothers to destroy their well-organized society. They're working to stop single-family homes, shut down most of our stores, banning most manufacturing, closing, we now have threats with the Green New Deal to close down the airline industry and severely regulate farms and the entire food industry. One of the things that's really interesting is that in the, when you see the animal rights movement puts these ads and so forth and videos on television of these horrible conditions of animals on farms. You've seen the ones, the chickens never touch the ground, this sort of thing. Well, interestingly, all of their regulations, all of their moves are destroying the small farmer. The small farmers are the ones, they love their animals, they take care of them, they know how to take care of them. It's the corporate farms that are those horror scenes. But every one of their regulations is moving everything towards the corporate farms and killing the small farmer. Once again, their solutions to things are in exactly the opposite direction where they should go. In short, the Green New Deal represents the largest step ever taken by the socialist, sustainabilist forces that have been pushing Agenda 21 for 27 years. But just as I was met with scoffing and charges of being a conspiracy scaremonger, the Green New Deal has been met with scoffing and lack of concern. But as I again warned that the Green New Deal was the most radical step to enforce Agenda 21, many of my own supporters, I put out some emails on this, I got some snarky emails laughingly telling me, "Tom, that is just too nuts to ever be made into law. Ha, 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 come on, Tom." Then the laughing really started when the Republican-controlled Senate brought the Green New Deal up for a vote, and the tally was 57-0. They didn't even vote for themselves, for their own plan, went the joke. "Such a silly, stupid little girl," they said with great hilarity. Poor Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Leaders of many established conservative organizations in Washington, D.C. laughed too. My friends, the fools are the Republicans and the established conservative organizations, because they are ignoring this just as they ignored Agenda 21. They have failed to understand the determination of these forces behind that silly little girl. These globalists set a trap for the Republicans, and they marched right into it. What really occurred is that the Green New Deal pushes the radical agenda, which has been struggling for 27 years as Agenda 21, way beyond anything ever imagined by Republicans and conservative leadership. It's a classic negotiating tactic. They came to the table and they tossed it way down the road. And the Republicans went, well, we can't do that, but we can do this. They have just moved it as far down, way farther than it was. In short, as I said, they are coming at this and everything in our way of life. The Republicans were completely unprepared for it, since they have ignored my warnings for 27 years. The Green New Deal sounded too nuts. They were listening to that, didn't listen to me for 27 years. I want to give Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez an award, because she has done more in 3 months than I've been able to do in 27 years. There's a national discussion going on here. There's a debate. There are things people are beginning to see how crazy all this is. The award that I'd like to give her is a little copter beanie with tinfoil on it. And the reason I picked that out is because it has a propeller on top. It is wind-powered, so it's environmentally correct. So we actually are working to maybe give her that. But she has done this. She's brought this debate right to us. But they said it's too far out. No one would fall for this. They laughed and dismissed it and without any thought. And the Senate showed them, didn't they, when the Senate voted for this? Ha ha. But watch what has happened since the Senate vote and the laughing began. Almost 100 Democrat members of Congress have signed on to the House bill. Almost every one of the 20-plus Democrat presidential candidates is talking about it. The news media is filled with stories on pieces and parts of the Green New Deal. The discussion is growing. It's becoming acceptable. But here's the kicker. Here's where the laughing stops as the Republicans fall into the trap. Florida Republican Representative Matt Gaetz has announced that he is working on the Green New Deal Light. Says Gaetz, his bill would be more reasonable. And reasonable, you've heard how radical the Green New Deal is. He says his bill is only 10% less to the alternative to occasional Cortez Green New Deal. A whole 10% less. In the Senate, Tennessee Senator Lamar Alexander is countering with his Manhattan Project for clean energy. The difference? Almost nothing. He's allowing where her bill says only wind and solar. he's allowing in some natural gas and a few things like that, but much more reasonable, you understand. This is exactly what the Democrats were counting on. They make an outrageously radical proposal that moves the agenda miles down the road, and then, to be more reasonable, the stupid Republicans join right in with just a little smaller proposal. That's how we lose a nation, by being reasonable to tyrants. The fact is, almost 50% of the Green New Deal is already in the works in various ways, as I've been fighting it across the country under Agenda 21 policy. All as called for in the Green New Deal, California has set a deadline to force homeowners to install wind and solar power as traditional energy sources of oil and gas will be phased out within, I believe they said, 10 years. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, the city council is moving to eliminate zoning protections for single-family homes, calling such protections racist. The mayor of Minneapolis has said that people who are living in single-family homes with yards and so forth are self-segregating themselves against lower-income citizens who couldn't live there. And so the move is on to get rid of those protections for single-family homes. The same attack on single-family homes is taking place in the Oregon State Legislature, the city of Chicago and their council, and the Baltimore City Council, to name just a few. Their marks, they're in this drive to abolish private property rights. Smart growth programs are in every city in the nation, targeting the elimination of private cars for transportation in favor of public buses and trains and bikes, just as called for in the Green New Deal. Landlords are being targeted as the drive is on for rent controls, even as government is piling on the costs through higher taxes and more controls on energy use. How long can the landlords hold out? They raise all these costs on them, but they say, oh, it's not fair to make people pay that much, so we're going to have you lower the rents. The real goal, eventually, as we're eliminating single-family homes and we're going to eliminate private landlords, everything will become government housing. That is Agenda 21 and the Green New Deal. I've also reported about the attack on the beef industry by the World Wildlife Fund, falling right into the hands of the Green New Deal, which calls for the end of beef consumption. The World Wildlife Fund has made it part of their whole plan. To save the earth, we've got to stop beef consumption. And yet, they have grabbed hold of our beef industry. And now comes this news. As the Congress, the news media, and presidential candidates debate the good ideas of the Green New Deal, New York City Mayor William de Blasio has rushed to introduce his own version. It's a bundle of 10 bills designed to meet the massive reduction of the energy use called for in the Paris Climate Accord, which President Trump refused to join. The first step was for the New York City Council to pass what they called a Climate Mobilization Act with a vote of 45-2 as the council, when it was voted on, broke into cheers and applause. De Blasio is expected to sign it in the next few weeks. Among the provisions are a ban on glass skyscrapers. I'm putting mud up, I don't know. It also calls for a ban on hot dogs and massive cuts in energy use, just as called for in the Green New Deal. The legislation seeks to eliminate more than 1 million cars off the road. State by state, city by city, the radical provisions of the Green New Deal are being put into force, or they're at least being openly considered. It's become reasonable to talk about. Controls on what we eat, how we live, and how we move about. That's Agenda 21. That's the Green New Deal. That's a disaster to our economy and to our way of life. It's happening at a rapid rate. So I just wonder, who's laughing now? The global sustainabilists are determined to win this fight and destroy everything that you and I stand for. So you and I must learn how to fight back, or we will surely lose the very concept of freedom. The challenge to us is, what do we do about it? Now, I gave you some examples today on what to do in the local communities and so forth, but let's talk about political parties. The fact is, every political party is talking about taxes, health care, immigration, and gun control. But no party is addressing the pain of the ranchers who are under siege by the federal government, the Bureau of Land Management, that is taking their land and their water. I spent 2 days earlier this week hosting Jeanette Finicum, the wife of Lavoy Finicum, who was murdered by BLM and federal agents because he was standing up for the ranchers. It was a very emotional period, let me tell you. No political party is talking about the attack on our food supply, such as the World Wildlife Fund's takeover of the beef industry. Yet we are getting reports daily now of dangers found in diseased beef. This comes from, this beef is starting to come from foreign countries. The first thing they did is they removed the labeling of country of origin. American beef, American farmers and ranchers have always produced a high quality of food. We didn't have problems, people getting sick by it. All of a sudden, you're hearing these stories of people getting sick. Tyson's Food sends its chickens to China to be processed and brought back. You've heard stories about what happens. Food comes from China. No political party is talking about the overtaxing and the destruction of single-family homes and neighborhoods. No political party is even discussing the destruction of our local system of government through the establishment of non-elected regional councils. These councils are eliminating political boundaries and the power of locally elected representatives. The American system is disappearing in silence. No political party is talking about the massive influence and the control of the private non-governmental organizations, as I demonstrated today, and planners that have invaded every single level of our government, pushing their insane policies that we now recognize as the Green New Deal. NGOs are deeply entrenched in Congress, in every state legislature, in every county and city council. There, they lobby, push, demand, intimidate to get your local elected officials to make their private agendas law. The fact is, they are not, as I pointed out, they are not government agencies, and they have no power unless the elected officials give it to them, and they have no intention of giving up that power. The only way that we can toss them out into the street is to elect people who understand their threat and their agenda and will take a strong action to remove them from the halls of government. Democrats empower them. Republicans are clueless. Libertarians are pathetically confused by the whole process. They continue to believe that public-private partnerships are free enterprise. Give me a break. It's Mussolini fascism. You are the only party which understands what needs to be done. You've never been in a better opportunity to grow and change things and achieve your mission to restore the Constitution. Do you, as a political party, want to get the attention of millions of Americans who are suffering from this government overreach? Do you want to defeat the Socialist Democrats and the Me Too Republicans? Do you want to restore the American Republic?
Yes.
Then get mad and be the party that takes on these issues. The victims of these policies are all over the country, and they are desperate to hear any candidate or elected official, any party, anywhere, even mention these policies that are overrunning every single city, county, and state. They are losing everything they have. They have been shut out of the American dream. And if they hear you take on these issues in upcoming campaigns at every level of government, they will flock to you. I know this because I work with them every day. Americans are starting to wake up to these dangers, and they are desperate. They want a new voice that stands for freedom. So, run candidates for city council, for county commission, and the state legislatures who will articulate these issues. I know the important thing is to run for president and looking at Congress and so forth, but the local level is where you can win. And that's where I believe you can make changes and you can begin to move in there. Speak to these victims, these desperate Americans. Name the names of these NGOs, the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, ICLEI, others involved in that. Make them own their own policies, challenge their policies and their funding sources. Show the public what a danger they are. And then challenge your opponents as to why they are giving these NGOs such power and influence. There's the strength. Challenge your opponents. Show who these guys are and make them own it. Elected officials keep referring to these NGOs and planners who live on the federal grants as stakeholders. They are not stakeholders. You are. They are carpetbaggers. They don't even live in the communities they work in. They are there to grab everything they can, especially our property and our freedom. Paint a clear picture as to what life in America will be like under these policies. You know, with every American, will they be able to make a choice of their own lives? Or will it be like, you know, in living our lives, will it become like a daily visit to the DMV? Because that's what America is going to be like. Already getting there pretty rapidly. Make your opponents responsible for their own policies. Put their names on them. Make them defend their plans and help the people see the truth. Because, my friends, that's how you drain the swamp and restore the United States of America. Thank you.